the Kung Fu Culture. Thank you for joining me. This is the first podcast of 2025. And actually, the year started off with a lot of Sanda stuff, right? So let's go ahead and talk about like why Sanda is such a great style. It's actually one of the greatest striking styles that you just don't know about. Right? So I kind of want to talk about three main reasons why it's so effective for MMA. Then we kind of talk about um, like why it's not so well known or utilized, and then I want to definitely talk about a weakness of Sanda that actually I made a few videos about in the past. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the strengths. We recently, over the past weekend, won championship. Had a match with Meng Bo, the Sanda fighter from China, who was one of the only people to have a win over Zhang Wei Li, the Sanda fighter from China, who's like the champion in UFC. Um, and we kind of talk about that. So, like Meng Bo's current training, she's switched from uh, like training in China to training in Thailand. One of the main reasons is that there's so many people like traveling through there, so she could get a wider variety of high quality sparring partners and stuff. So, um, but as you can see in the fight, um, she still used a lot of the Sanda principles. So let's go ahead and get into that right now. Then, so what were Mungbo's keys to victory, and what is basically the Sanda key to victory? It is the striking first and foremost. So my my teacher in China in Beijing, uh, he his name was Guan, Coach Guan Jianmin. He's one of the older guys who was like promoting Sanda just in particular, like trying to raise awareness. But he was one of the pro coaches even for that really famous Sanda fighter Liu Hailong. Whenever Liu was fighting in like international matches against like Thai, like Muay Thai and all that. So, um, with that being said, my coach would always say it's still ultimately a striking style, right? So you have punches and kicks. You really have to be focusing on that, but it also has takedowns. So that with all that combined, it still has a wrestling or a kind of top-down approach. So the first thing that Mungbo was working on, and she's always been known to have like knockout power. So she was working on those punches because in this case, her opponent was a freestyle wrestler who only level changed and shot in for double legs or single legs. So using that boxing or having that boxing background that's baked into Sanda. So you can have people who are maybe more kick oriented or more punch oriented or more throw oriented. But in Mung's case, she's definitely got really great knockout power. She's knocked out several women in the past. So she can utilize that. So she can utilize basically the uppercuts, hooks. So anything lower, as soon as she saw the level change from her opponent, Sawada, she was throwing the punches. So she wasn't necessarily throwing straight punches, like elevated, like high up, where she was like her body was really upright. It's not like how you want to be thinking about that. That'd be like a lower level striker, right? Mung Ball's throwing those uppercuts, like really waiting for that moment for when she saw the level change, then she can just throw it. Also, the other thing, the next key. So besides, so we got like the striking or the boxing in this case, right? So using the uppercuts, which I think a lot of people just forget about because usually they can use like straight or like people are really comfortable throwing straights and hooks, right? So the uppercut tends to be underutilized. So you got to be working on that. Right. The other thing would be, or the next thing would be that the takedown defense. So since Sanda has takedowns, then the takedown defense would be something that Mung had been working on for years and years. So This would be one reason why it's like whenever Sawada shot in, it was always stuffed, or so she either Mung would sprawl, or she would raise her up, throw some strikes, right? So since the wrestling and the striking is like baked in together, it's much easier for someone who's used to that to add strikes into their takedown defense, right? So say like if someone is it comes from like a Muay Thai or boxing background, and they're not used to having everything baked in. A lot of times, what we've seen in MMA, where it's like someone who's a specialist in one thing, they won't mix in the strikes. So, say like if they're a specialist in jujitsu, if they're on the ground, they're just like maybe holding someone in guard, and they're not striking back, right? Same thing, someone who's only an amateur wrestler, if they're on top, sometimes they just hold them on top and they don't add the strikes in there. So since Sanda has everything kind of baked in, it makes a Sanda practitioner probably a little bit more used to blending in the strikes with the different positions like wrestling. Right, so that'd be the second key to victory in Monk's case, but just in Sanda in general, right? So striking, the boxing, and kicking. Then number two would be the takedown defense, and then you can blend and the ability to blend in the strikes with the takedown defense, right? And then the third thing would be ultimately the top-down approach, right? So that is more of a wrestling approach, but it's also like a traditional martial art approach, right? So we have traditional martial arts around the world, and say like traditional grappling styles. A lot of them you lose like if you get knocked down, right? Especially if the person who throws you down stays standing. That is the way of like I think the perception that most people will have, where it's like if someone's upright and then you're down, that is like kind of like it doesn't look good, right? If you're on the ground, if you're on the floor, you're on the mat, whatever, and the other person is standing above you, or you can even think of what's that iconic photo of Muhammad Ali where he's up and he has his arm up like that, and he's looking down at his opponent. uh this is the way people are kind of thinking about matches, and um, this is in Sanda, right? But that translates to winning matches because in say like in jiu-jitsu, you can get submissions off of your back, but you're fighting gravity, you're fighting the weight of the other person, so you don't have as much freedom of movement. That's why you want to have that top-down approach, right? Right. We have one comment here from Hike. Why does it lose in physical 100 to a power lifter? I have no clue what you're talking about, but why does it win in MMA? Right. So we have, and so it's a good time to talk about many of the practitioners. So a lot of people are talking about the Dagestanis and how dominant wrestling they are and stuff. So one of my students just let me know that in the recent video from Mighty Mouse, he was talking to the Dagestanis, and they were talking about how they have like a Sanda background. Let me see. Uh, yeah, Mighty Mouse, his interview with Islam Makachev. Apparently, he competed in Sanda for 5 years. Then we also have that one undefeated UFC fighter, Zabit Magomed Sharipov. So he also like you can check out his highlights. He's like throwing people around, and he retired undefeated in UFC. A lot of people wanted him to continue because he was so exciting, and he just would win. But I think he was kind of like one of those people um like oh man, the Eagle, right? So the guy who beat Conor McGregor for some reason is I don't follow MMA that as much, but anyway, he retired right after a certain point. So oh darn, the name's gonna because I was just thinking about these other Dagestani guys, and so anyway, so maybe one of the reasons why they're also so good at blending everything is because Sanda is a thing there, in Dagestan. So you have several of them competing in Sanda, so they're already blending the striking with the wrestling. Um, and also besides that, we have a lot of the Chinese women, and then we also have now we have a lot of South American women who are fighting in UFC and winning their MMA matches, right? So then that leads to the next things, like why aren't more people doing it? Well, like besides the Dagestani men, the other people I mentioned were all women. So I think there's a component where, so even though it's winning, and so even though, say, like in one championship, we have men who do Sanda, like especially the men from the Philippines, they tend to have more of a Sanda background, Sanda base. They're still winning fights, but it's like fewer, right? Fewer men doing it. So it could just be like a perception thing where they think that, oh, Muay Thai or boxing is like a man's thing. And it's like a tougher, like a harder fighting styles, or even the Dutch kickboxing, right? So I think a lot of people who are attracted to more of the macho kind of like use your body to stop everything, then yeah, they're going to be attracted to all those types of styles. So then when you see a style that uh, is, if we say, like a more of a fluid or flexible style like Sanda, they're just not going to be attracted to it, even though, so like over the years, it's like even though you see that these people are winning, and probably like the in the men's divisions, like the most dominant men are like these Dagestani guys, and but it's like people will be like, well, maybe I got it. So if Islam did Sanda for 5 years, maybe I'm gonna do Muay Thai even harder to beat him. And so it's like it's this weird logic or lack of logic that people have, where it's like instead of learning about what these people are doing to win, they're just like, oh, I'm gonna do Muay Thai harder. I'm gonna do boxing harder, or oh, he stayed on top of me and my jujitsu didn't work. I'm gonna learn jujitsu even harder to beat them, even though they use wrestling and this kind of top-down approach uh, to beat you. It might be like to your benefit to learn a little bit about wrestling or learn a little bit about Sanda, since these guys like literally just dominate MMA. So, and then again, yeah, like in the women's divisions, like Sanda women are really dominating. Um, so but that's why I don't know. Maybe it's like a tribalism, or I don't know, something where it's like you think that like doing the same thing you've been doing, even though it's not winning, or maybe you can win against a bunch of other people who don't do Sanda or whatever. And so you feel like, oh, I just got to get better at doing the same thing, which there's truth to that. So you have like boxers always working the same jab, uppercut, all these different, the same techniques over and over, which you really should be doing. You should be drilling, you should be doing all that. But there's like a gap between the different steps, right? So you have the striking, say like in Muay Thai, boxing, all these different things, you have the gap between the standing to the ground, right? And in Sanda, you have this no gap between standing to ground, right? But then this gets into where the weakness of Sanda is. So kind of wanted to talk about that too, where, because yeah, nothing's perfect, right? And so Sanda is best, right, as kind of like the starting, right, of the match, right? You start standing, and but once you get to the ground, then that's where in Sanda they would let you both stand up, right? So then that mean, and I think this is where the Dagestanis have filled in the gap, right? Because Sanda has that gap, right? So they don't have the mat wrestling, right? So I think unfortunately in China you'll have some Sanda fighters turn to jujitsu to fill that gap when someone's fallen, but since jujitsu has like that bottom up approach, then you you like it's like it doesn't like compute in a way, like it doesn't fill in that flow where since Sanda has like this top down approach, and then you learn something where it's kind of like on your back facing up. you shouldn't be landing that way. If you do like a proper Sanda takedown, you should be landing belly down on top of the person, right? So it kind of, it's like it's not the proper thing to fill in the gap. Even amateur wrestling might be a little bit better to fill in that gap that Sanda has. Ideally, I of course I have a catch wrestling channel, right? So here's the Catch Wrestling Alliance T-shirt I'm wearing. So I'm a little bit biased in that way, but I think that catch wrestling would be the most ideal thing for Sanda. I feel like they just blend seamlessly since a lot of the throws are the same, but then catch wrestling has all the wrestling stuff in it, plus submission holds. And so I think ultimately that is the best blend of styles. But or just like Sanda, catch wrestling is more rare as well. It's like it's very difficult to find an authentic coach like anywhere in the world. So um, while it is my dream for some of the fighters to learn it, I think it'd be very difficult to even get that, because then maybe even some of the fighters will be thinking it's like, oh, I got to be learning jujitsu since it's like so popular, and it's really what started UFC, right? It was like a huge promotion for jujitsu right at the beginning, so uh, it'll be difficult for Sanda to adopt catch wrestling as that style, but as with regards to all the three pros that we mentioned, right? The three pros like of striking, right? Uh, takedown defense and mixed with strikes and having that top-down approach. Then a con would be it's on the competition. Once you take the person down, you get stood back up. So the mat wrestling or the ground stuff is completely missing, right? So it's ultimately in my opinion, of course, like the greatest striking base that you should have or that you could have, right? But um, like it is missing the mat wrestling, right? And that's where I wish a lot of the Sanda background fighters would like just work on. But apparently, I guess like the Dagestanis work on that. So I guess that's what those are the people who've like really figured it out, right? They're so tough to beat. But hopefully, then now once people realize that, I mean, I should probably cut out that clip, right? Now I didn't see that interview, but I'll look it up and then maybe I'll cut out that clip and like just share it on our shorts or something. Hopefully, Mighty Mouse won't be mad and like try to take down my video, right? But it's great information for people because yeah, it's like it wasn't Islam, it wasn't just Islam, it was people earlier than that too, right? So maybe think about it. I'm trying to get this camera to stop moving. Hopefully it's okay. Yeah, there we go. It makes me feel weird seeing the camera move around. Okay, but also let me know if you have any questions, any comments. Of course, this is just my opinion, right? But I've won 2 national Sanda championships. I trained in Beijing Sports University. That's why I mentioned earlier my coach is Guan Jianmin. He was not the real professor there. He was like a visiting professor, but he was the guy I trained with the most. Um, yeah, every day basically. And so the training is tough there. It's great. Oh, but then say like another, which reminds me another thing. So there have been interviews, say like Zhang Wei Li, where she was saying that she didn't know about Sanda, even though she lived in China. So even within China, it's still not necessarily the most well-known thing. So I think Sanda has like a deficit, right, of people who know about it. Um, and then that translates to like the rest of the world as well. But then I think on top of that, you have that layer where it's like you get a bunch of people thinking like, oh, I got to learn Muay Thai or I got to do boxing and stuff. So I think ultimately to be a better Sanda fighter, you don't necessarily need to learn Muay Thai. I think kickboxing or boxing, like supplementing your training. So if you're mostly doing Sanda, then you can do either boxing or like pro kickboxing rule, like K1 style rules. So you just get you even sharper at throwing the strikes. Muay Thai has a much different say like approach to kickboxing. So I don't think that will help you as much as these other styles. I think the other styles will enhance your sound, like boxing and like pro kickboxing rules, and then that will translate to you just being an even sharper Sanda striker. And then if you add even the freestyle wrestling, just be aware of some of the submission holds of jiu-jitsu. But say ideally, right, if you can learn catch wrestling, you're free to look at our catch wrestling channel, Catch Wrestling Alliance. Um, but yeah, so if you want to train, right, you can always, if you're in LA, right, come train with us. Um, so I think those are the main points, right? So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and comment, ask your questions. But yeah, I really love Sanda, two-time U.S. champion. Um, but yeah, I recognize that there is something missing, and I think that's what really led me to learning catch wrestling, because I would take like jujitsu classes, and of course they couldn't take me down, and um, it was really hard for them to submit me and all that. So but then amateur wrestling didn't have submission holds, but catch wrestling did, so it really filled in that gap that I noticed as well, like long ago. So hopefully this kind of helps. I think I want to try to keep working on doing podcasts for this channel. So if you got any ideas of things we can talk about, it doesn't have to be Sanda, but like kung fu related. Have a wide background in all kind, like not all styles of kung fu, right? There's so many, but in many styles of kung fu, like a lot of internal ones, um, some external, some weapons, self-defense stuff. So but I just happen to, spend a lot of time doing Sanda and competing in Sanda, and also competing in the Chinese wrestling, right? So it's jacket wrestling and some other traditional Chinese wrestling styles that are more like freestyle wrestling. So that means no jacket. You go in there with your shirt off and you wrestle in the dirt. Yeah, feel free to let me know, and then I'll be happy to talk about it. So also too, I want to try to add a little slogan in this style or in our channel. Right. So what do you think about this quote? It's actually a quote from Mao Zedong. It's like he was talking about you got to be staying fit and like gaining knowledge, right? So his quote was like, you have to enlighten the mind and make fierce the body. So maybe it gives you something to think about, right? So you always got to be learning and strengthening your body, because they both help each other, right? So it makes you a complete person, a complete healthy person, right? So don't neglect both aspects. So that being said, we'll see you next time.